Okay, this one is sponsored by the publisher, so you can win a copy of it. Just let us know in the comments what you think, and I think I know what you're going to think because it's quality and we absolutely loved it. So let's get into it. The game is NanoApostle and it's published by P-Cube.
Yeah, this describes itself as a sci-fi boss rush, and they're not wrong there, that's for sure. And as Mark said, this is a lot of fun. So let's get into it now. What exactly is NanoApostle? Well, let's find out.
So it starts within a shadowy research facility, and you play as a girl called Anita, who's been implanted with a sentient nanomechanical entity known as Apostle.
Yeah, Anita's purpose is basically to fight against a number of bioweapon prototypes, and it looks as if Anita's whole existence is tied to a war that you are being told about concurrently, and obviously details of that will unfold as you play further.
Yeah, for a boss rush game, it does actually have quite a bit of story, and they're told through cutscenes between the fights with those bioweapons, and it certainly adds quite a bit of intrigue. On the flip side of that, Anita as a character has a real naivety about her, which makes her quite endearing.
Yeah, you can tell that she's almost like a newborn baby, isn't she? You know, she's a complete blank slate that's been taught in quite an innocent way, whilst at the same time being raised to be this deadly weapon. It's quite an interesting juxtaposition.
When it comes to gameplay then, this is where I didn't expect what I think you already knew was coming, and that's the boss rush style. Essentially, you enter what feels like a training area, and then a giant boss drops in and it absolutely destroys you.
Yeah, it feels a bit like in the X-Men. They have the danger room, which they go into to train, and it obviously simulates an environment outside. This is not quite like that, but in terms of just being thrown into this area where this huge creature then comes at you and you need to defeat them, and obviously whilst it is a training exercise, that's not the way it's treated whilst you're in there, and these boss battles are tough. You know, we've recently completed Cuphead, so I suppose we were due a new type of boss rush game to play, and this one fits the bill because these bosses have a huge amount of health, and they also have a couple of stages that you have to defeat them in before you can, gain ultimate victory, and you'll need to use all of the skills provided to you in order to reach that point. So in terms of the attacks then, you have a light attack that you use by pressing Y. Using this consistently will reveal a destruction point on your enemy, and it also fills Anita's energy bar.
And once that's full, she can target that destruction zone by pressing ZR. It basically adds one stack of infected to the enemy. This is shown with a little diamond above their head.
Yeah, you'll see that diamond start to fill as you continue to attack the enemy, and that move with ZR is almost like a bullet. You shoot the enemy basically, and you can stun them into place once that diamond is full. As I mentioned, further attacks using your light attack do increase the infection, and when that infection bar is full, a state called Absorb is triggered, which is that kind of stunned state if you like, and this is where you can really get some damage in and do some proper damage to the bosses.
There's a fantastic balance of mechanics here. Basically, Apostle and Anita have a symbiotic relationship where they're almost merged together, and you can use Apostle as like a grapple move that charges up, and it's shown beneath your health bar as you do attack damage.
Not only does this let you get across the screen, but it also serves as a dash attack, and again allows you to do some serious damage.
And another way of getting them into that state is to use the parry move, a very traditional mechanic that here is tied to the colour yellow, so generally when you see that you can parry that damage.
Yeah, you'll see as you go through the bosses, this parry will become harder. It may be that they fire multiple shots at you at once and you'll need to connect with all of the shots in order to stun them, or you'll see them shoot a number of different parryable attacks at you in all directions. It really does link into the difficulty of the gameplay, and it all feels very smooth.
It felt to me a lot like the first time I played either Hades or that recent Turtles game that we played.
Yes,
yeah. The controls are incredibly tight, and it's very important for this style of gameplay, isn't it?
It is. It's one of those games where the first time you play the boss, you'll lose quite quickly. Well, most people will. The first time you beat the boss and assume you've beaten the boss and they go into their second phase, you'll be like, are you having a laugh? Like, again? I've got to go again? And you'll lose quite quickly. But then you start to master each segment to the point that becomes second nature, and you feel yourself getting better, not through upgrades necessarily, although we'll talk about those in a minute, just through your own skills increasing. And it's a good moment when you take those bosses down. It really does feel very good, and that is made possible by how good the controls are and how fluid everything feels.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to in terms of the way I experience it is almost like a flow state in gaming.
Yeah.
When a game can create that flow state, it feels so good, doesn't it?
It does. You almost, it can sound a bit over the top, but you almost leave your own body and watch yourself play, don't you? Because you feel like your controls, your reflexes become so good at times that you can't possibly be doing it yourself, you know, and it's only when you've beaten it and you return to a normal state you think, wow, like that was all right. I did all right there.
Anyone that's played Cuphead knows exactly what Glen's talking about. You end up looking at the middle of the screen, and you're not even looking at your character.
Yeah.
And it just takes over. Now with this one, when you die, because you will, if you've reached the first stage, so you've beaten the first stage of the boss, you will still get a skill point, and there's an upgrade tree.
Yes, there is. There are a number of different objectives for each boss that you can achieve, like beating them within a certain amount of time, or beating the first phase X number of times. And by just ticking these off, even if you don't beat the boss, you'll get those skill points, as Mark said, and you can then go outside of battle into your skill tree and attribute these points where you want to put them and kind of build the character to something that suits you. And some of these skills have like a positive and a negative element to them. So it has that risk-reward state of I do more damage, but I receive less health when I heal myself, that sort of thing.
What I love as well is that the developers have remembered that it's a game and it's supposed to be fun. So if you want to trade those skills back in and then try something else, you can do that whenever you want.
Yeah, and I do think this is important. You know, in a world where if you're not as good at games as someone else, you almost look down on, just to be able to try something, it didn't work for you, and get your skill points back and try again it's really a very wise choice, I think.
The be-all and end-all in terms of this gameplay though really does rest with those bosses and their designs. They have to be good enough that each one feels fresh, and quite happily can say that that's the case.
Definitely, even the first couple of bosses, you go from this like hulking, almost like a mech, wasn't he, to this flying creature that has shields around it that you need to take the shields down first in order to then deal damage. And they challenge you in very different ways. I personally found the first boss harder than the second boss, but they both presented their own challenges, and that's definitely a good sign going forward.
As Glen said before, you have those criteria that really keeps that flow going.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly say I had a great deal of fun with this one. You know, I'm not someone that's played a lot of Souls-like games or things like that, and the idea of trying the same boss over and over again didn't appeal to me initially in any sort of game, but I was getting really getting quite stuck into this one, and every time I lost, it was immediately, I know what I could do better. Let's go again, you know, or trying a skill like every time you heal yourself, you're invincible for a few seconds, and being able to trade that back in if it didn't work, things like that. It's a very well-designed game, and if you like boss rushes or just boss battles, difficult games, however you want to class it, I can see a lot of people having a lot of fun here.
Completely agree. I think with a sponsored video, we always are extra careful with our recommendations. You know, we would usually keep it factual and things like that. But here, the game's so good. You know, I can guarantee reviews are going to come out saying this is amazing. It's really a good game, isn't it?
For sure, yeah. Let's move on to the visuals now, and it's presented with a pixel art style, really nice and clean, has an anime feel to it, I reckon, and that kind of merges in quite interestingly with the war segments that you see in cutscenes or possibly flashbacks, we're not quite sure. Obviously, in terms of the colours, the facility that you're in is quite dark. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has that clean, still feeling to it that makes you feel it's a futuristic place, but it's certainly not a welcoming place. But then the personality comes through because of those bioweapons and how well they are designed.
Yeah, it does that thing that we see in photography sometimes, almost like monochromatic in terms of most of its colours, and then it will drop in a bit of red. For example, the first boss is vibrant red within this world that's quite dull. And then when it does certain special moves as well, those will be highlighted in a specific colour just to make it very easy to see what you're doing.
And you do have a splash of blood when you beat a boss. There's like a fatality that you have to perform, isn't there? Once they're done and their health bar has been depleted, it's almost like Mortal Kombat, you know, finish him. And you have to jump in there, and then there's the splashes of blood as well. That does work well with the monochrome that Mark mentioned.
Performance-wise, it is 60. It's so 60. Like, it's super smooth. I didn't see any drops at all, and we didn't have any crashes. Very good. The soundtrack was pretty nice. It wasn't overly standout, but the sound effects were nice and crunchy, and they lent a lot to the experience.
Yeah, and again, just in a game where you're going to be replaying certain segments quite a bit, unless you're a Jedi and smash it in your first go, it complements what's happening, and it never becomes annoying, which is just essential in such a game.
This one retails at £16.99, has a download size of 656 megs, which isn't bad at all, and it releases today.
As of launch day, which is today as we said, there will be 10% available off of the game's price on the eShop, and that runs up until the 25th of September. And just to add a bit more value, as well as the boss rush mode, there is a challenge mode which plays as a more traditional, platformer I suppose, albeit played from a top-down perspective, where you'll use the skills of combat to get across a number of different hazards, trying to avoid attacks, using the grapple move at times to make up distances across platforms, and trying to get to an end goal.
So that's it for this one. You can probably tell we really did love this.
Absolutely. Like, take it from me, this isn't my genre really, and I thought it was great. I had a great deal of fun with it, and I'll certainly be plugging away to see how many bosses we can take down.
Lovely stuff. As we said at the start, if you want to win a copy of it, just let us know in the comments what you think of it. And a big thanks to the publisher for sponsoring this episode.
A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.